Good afternoon, everyone. Sam here. This is the number 10 lecture in the Introduction to Wiccan Theology discussion. And today's lecture principally consists of community and clergy considerations. I'm going to talk about forming covens and moon groups, building a body of lore, and some general information about training to become a priestess or priest in the craft. To start with, teaching a religious or spiritual path to students or to a new group is a great responsibility. A priestess shares information and helps the students develop skills, just like secular teachers. But we also monitor people's spiritual development and counsel them in their spiritual and day-to-day lives. As religious authorities, priestesses and priests serve as models of what a person who is well advanced on this particular path should be like. Wicca is a new religious movement which shapes our role and responsibilities and the groups that we establish. We're developing a body of collective experience, knowledge, and wisdom about what and how and whom we teach. Creating that knowledge base is part of our role and of those who will follow after us. The beginners we train will shape the future of the religion that we love. A large part of this lecture came from a book of mine called Creating Lore, Writing Ritual, which I recommend to people. Begin with, what is a coven? We'll start with the definition. A coven is a group of people who make a formal spiritual commitment to one another and to the group that they are forming, understanding that the coven owns the authority, not the people who exercise it. No individual, including the priestess, has authority that does not come from the group as a whole. It's an initiatory mystery religion tradition, exploring the inner mysteries of our religion. In British traditional Wicca, coven members are all priestesses and priests in training. Its membership and rituals are secret to the uninitiated, not open to the general public, and by invitation only. Many Wicca-influenced non-BTW groups have formed whose purpose was to build trust, mutual education, and to facilitate growth in a less focused way among their members. A moon group, of course, is a women-only group formed for the similar purposes, but its members frequently rotate leadership, and they aren't training towards initiation. These groups resemble covens in some ways, but are not covens. There are 5 basic functions that covens can fulfill. First of all, ritual groups, ritually celebrating the old gods and the old ways. Second, teaching groups, instructing new members in traditional lore and skills. Third, as support groups, helping members work through the problems of life and supporting ongoing spiritual development. Fourth, a task group, doing some kind of community service. And fifth, a family of choice, filling the gaps left in members' lives by absent or dysfunctional families of origin. Covens emphasize these functions differently, and some even abstain from some of them. A large number of ritual groups just sort of happen. They grow out of groups of friends who get together to talk about books and magic, or to celebrate in the woods, or out of Wicca 101 basics classes. Depending on a variety of factors, these groups can be more or less successful. If they have a good basis of agreement, a couple of effective leaders, access to good reading material and a little mentorship, and if the spark of the divine is present and nourished in the group, if the soil is right, the people come together and it happens, and these groups may eventually deepen to become covens by taking oaths to bind their members together or through initiations. Now, covens can come into existence in several ways. They can bud off of existing groups, as when a recently initiated second or third degree priestess and priest and a few of the coven members decide to start something on their own. in which case they can usually call upon help and advice from the priestess and priest of the group that they left. They can form around one or two knowledgeable or determined people who gather together some books and some friends and just start. They can grow out of a Wicca 101 Basics or other class series. People who meet and like one another can take what they've learned and starting meeting together to explore it more deeply. I'm going to talk about this principally from my perspective and experience as a more or less British traditional Wiccan initiate, which means, among other things, that I value initiation, leadership, formal structure, secrecy, and a closed membership to groups. I have reasons for each of these preferences. I take it as a given that the gods want there to be more covens operating, and so that people involved in forming new covens are performing sacred activities in doing so. They must approach this activity as they do the performance of any other powerful and important ritual. The coven is, itself, a magical activity, a ritual of worship of the immortal gods in continual process. At the beginning of each coven, the goddess inspires a particular person or a couple of people to need to be involved in a ritual group that will better meet their spiritual needs than solitary work or the group that they're currently involved in. It's important to recognize that specific people are called and have a particular responsibility toward the group's birth. Although there are exceptions, groups without recognized leadership are much less productive and much shorter lived than those that authorize someone to act as a ritual leader. Before starting a new group, potential leaders must search inward for their motives and desires. One cannot hope to transmit knowledge to someone else until they've become knowledgeable. So search for the direction from the divine within and ask, why do I want to do this? How strong is my need for a coven? Strong enough to weather disappointments? And what do I want and expect to get from it? How will this coven better serve the goddess and the horned god than the individual activities of the people who will be involved in it? And most important, take a searching moral inventory of yourself. What specific qualities do I have that led the gods to choose to act through me and form a coven? It's a general rule in British traditional Wicca that you will join a pre-existing coven and advance there to second or third degree before you have the authority to make one of your own. Now, experience in an established coven shows that the leaders understand how things are supposed to work in a coven, both religiously and as a social community, in addition to making sure that you're familiar with their ideas. Unless you already have a lot of experience starting and maintaining any sort of a group, you'd probably be better off finding an established coven and starting there for practical reasons. Otherwise, you'll find yourself trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again. It's not just doing magic and ritual, it's working with people, their personalities and egos. Joining an already established tradition means not only learning from people who have done this already, but also learning things that you can never really learn from a book or solo work. It's just the nature of group work, and that's going to matter a lot more than what the specific beliefs and details of ritual practice are. In assuming the role of priestess, you don't deny your own wishes, but you ensure that they are in harmony with the wishes of the gods. And now it's time to get precise about your needs in the coven. As the new group bigs together a bunch of beginners and strangers to meld into collaborators and friends, the only thing you have to weigh them against is your dream, your vision or ideal of a good group. The more specific and articulate you can make that vision, leaving room for growth and change, the better. Size limits are important. Wiccan tradition prohibits payment of clergy. Almost all of us need to make our livings by working a secular job. We all have families and friends. Many are parents, which is another important and demanding role. In short, we have lives. And having lives actually makes us better clergy, more compassionate and responsive to the needs of others who also have lives. There's a maximum size for a coven, traditionally 13. It's actually whatever number can reasonably fit together in whatever the temple space will be, and the maximum size rather, for the perfect love and perfect trust, which is our ideal of our relationships to one another. This will differ depending on the particular people involved and space available. Practically, it's much better to start off with 4 or 5 and grow from there than try to assemble 15 or 20 people and suffer the inevitably high attrition and incompatibility. Don't worry about the maximum size. For the first while, you and your coven mates will be more concerned with the minimum size. The minimum size for an established coven is 1 person, since a coven is a magical entity, a ritual in honor of the old gods. Once a coven is formed, it continues to exist until it is dissolved. It is shaped and molded by people who perform its rituals, but it has a magical presence and is to some extent independent of specific individuals. Now, you'll run into the question of whom to invite to form the group with you. If you have a partner and a couple of close friends interested in this project, set a date to get together and talk about it, and perform the initial rituals to found the group. And from that base, the coven can grow and develop. But if you're alone in your search, it's a little more complicated. Join as many Facebook groups for witches, pagans, and druids in your neighborhood as you can. Keeping an eye on the types of discussion there will help you pick out your type of people and introduce you to some new friends. Online networking groups are not generally much use, but it's worth posting a note in some of them about your interests and very carefully evaluating those people that contact you. Let some of the most basic details of your group be known to everyone. This can be in your original announcement or in your first response. There's no point in wasting people's time or your own if, for example, they are looking for a same-sex group and your group is mixed, or if your group wishes to work mostly with the Celtic gods and they feel drawn to the Greeks. You might give out copies of your mission statement. Visiting your local Wiccan temple, where there is one, will introduce you to a community of people, some of whom will be in covens and looking for new members, and others who will be interested in connecting up with a coven that you might start. Attending the local pagan weekend campout festivals will introduce you to a number of pagans with different ways of doing things and will give you experience in group rituals. They're generally listed online, and people will talk about them in the discussion lists. If you attend a community college or university, visit the local student union office and see if there's a women's center or student newspaper on campus. Visit them both and ask about student groups on campus. Place an ad asking for interested people to contact you to found a student pagan club. If you found a pagan discussion group as a student club, that entitles you to book rooms at the school for speakers and events, and sometimes to financial or material help from the student union. A student club is a good place to recruit a coven from, and generally ends feeling of isolation and learn more about the craft without the obligations of a coven. There are pagan-inclined people at every university, and there are a couple of universities with Wiccan chaplains. I used to be the one at the U of A, for example. A very good way to meet a group of people is to offer or participate in a series of classes on the basics of Wicca. Only offer a class series if you actually know a fair amount about Wicca. So now that you've talked to a number of interesting people, done a preliminary screening of them over the phone, had them write a letter of self-introduction or fill out a questionnaire about key issues, and met them in person, it's come time for the first meeting of the coven. You can't put that off forever. In magical terms, the most important part of an enterprise is its beginning, because that shapes the remainder of the work. So insist on punctuality at that first meeting. Cast the circle in the way that you intend to continue to cast it, but with particular care being taken with each of the parts. Call the elements formally, and so on. The parts of a formal ritual that call for high trust and training, drawing down the moon and sun, trance work, and so on, should not be done at the first meeting. Beware of accepting or rejecting someone for extrinsic or ulterior reasons. Advanced spiritual development begins with deep self-confrontation as we work through our own old stuff to provide a clear channel for the wisdom of the gods. And not everyone is strong enough to face their own demons. If the seeker has trouble living in the world of form or mundane reality, as it's more often called, someone who can't tell their own fantasies from reality will have trouble integrating the experiences received during craft training and may well end up getting lost in his or her own head. If craft training raises some issues for the seeker that are too painful or difficult to cope with now, if they have a fragmented self or a poor sense of who he or she is, people who are seeking desperately for something outside of themselves to make themselves feel better, or who have no strong identity, can be carried away by magical experiences, especially divine possession. The craft reveals the parts of ourselves that we have hidden away. Most of us are made more powerful by the process. Craft training can heal and strengthen us. But for someone who is already vulnerable, who is very uncentered, and whose defenses are fragile and overwhelmed, it can be damaging. There's no clear way to know who will be hurt, who will cause harm to the group, and who will become stronger. But this is something you must bear in mind. Mental and emotional stability is the absolute minimum, necessary but not sufficient. In addition, there will be some people who are going to be antagonistic to anyone in charge simply because they're in charge, or who are going to be constant victims, or always need to be the center of attention. Kenneth Houck's book, Antagonists in the Church, is a very valuable guide for dealing with this sort of people. Now, on to becoming a priestess or priest. Wiccan tradition is centered on the mystical path of a deeper identification with particular goddesses and gods, as you grow from being a worshiper or devotee to being a priestess of the deity. Getting a call from a particular deity, or even establishing a strong personal relationship with her or him, does not make a person a priestess or priest. It's necessary as a first step. To connect with the goddess or god is to understand yourself in terms of the responsibilities as well as the opportunities for connection that you have with other persons, nature, and the power of existence. Wiccan theology recognizes that the picture drawn of the deity is an imaginative doorway into a realm of experience, rather than necessarily being a factual description of who really connected with the person having the experience. Beliefs are tools, and the imaginative elaboration and intensification of beliefs and experiences is a valuable skill to learn. Learning and practicing this skill is a conscious goal of the training process for Wiccan leaders. Wiccans also view mystical experience as an essential part of clergy training and expect their highest level clergy to undergo trance experiences on a regular basis. Mystical experience provides energy to all else that happens in the religion, and the ritual and institutions that contain and provide meaning to these experiences are important. Mystical training is, however, rational. Individuals that are recognized as talented in trance states undergo these experiences on behalf of the entire community. It's not a question of belief, but of experience. Our intention is to produce a religion of prophets, with direct access to the gods using symbols, including images and beliefs, as tools. We connect directly with divinity. Wicca is an elitist religion that most people are not suited to, at least as clergy people. Belief is not alone enough. It takes talent and the capacity to experience certain things and to go through a process of of personal transformation, initiation, before one can become a priestess or priest. It's also not a solo path, but one where the most profound experiences are the result of group efforts. The most important ritual practice for priestess training is drawing down the moon, a ritual of ecstatic possession trance. It's a ritual of incarnation in which the divine becomes human and present in and of our bodies. The priestess opens herself up, surrenders her body in trust to become inhabited by an awake and aware goddess. For a short time, generally only a few minutes, her body is the body of a goddess. A priest or priestess is trained in visualization, symbolism, sacred movement and mudras, mythology and theatrical skills, concentration and meditation, and a range of other skills and techniques, in particular techniques of magical ritual that vary depending on the emphases of particular groups or teachers as she or he progresses up through the levels of trance experience and priesthood training. The central experience and the axis around which all of the rest of the training revolves is trance induction, and the experiences derived from it, and the incorporation of those experiences form the larger pattern of clergy work. More important than any technique, though, are qualities of character. Developing these qualities of character takes time. Trust cannot be forced in the slightest. Assisting individuals to become like the gods by establishing conversation of their holy guardian angel and finding those that want to work with us individually and also collectively while remaining true to our humanity is an essential religious task. What we need to develop as we develop Wiccan ethics and ways of being together is a model of human excellence that we can aspire to. That's not a single person, because each person differs in our needs, capacities, and tastes. Clergy training, which I go into in quite a bit more detail in my book, The Uses of Ecstasy, centers on becoming, as much as possible, an excellent human being and a channel for the divine.